And we're streaming live on YouTube now, Chair.
Thank you. Right, well, welcome everybody to the West Northants Shadow Overview and Scrutiny Committee meeting. This is a meeting to look tonight at the Constitution, and we have a number of our officers with us tonight. So I'd like to just introduce them. We have Andrew Hunkin, who's the enabling lead legal democratic officer, and Catherine Whitehead, who is the director of legal and democratic services and the monitoring officer. Also George Candler, the interim chief exec. Should have asked you, George, exactly what your title is now. The chief exec for Northampton Borough Council, and Tracy, Tiff and Ed Bostock for democratic services. Thank you. Right, Tracy, do we have any apologies for non-attendance?
Oh, we have one apology, Chair. It's Councillor Emma Roberts.
Right, thank you. And do we have any notifications of requests to address at the meetings?
No, we have none.
Right, thank you. Members' declaration of interests? No?
Nobody appears to be indicating, Chair.
Thank you. Right, and really I don't really have any chair's announcements apart from the fact of three parts to the meeting tonight. We're looking at the Constitution, but we also have to approve the report for the budget, the Shadow Overview and Scrutiny Committee's report on the budget. So that will be towards the second part of the meeting, and there might be some additions that you'd like to make in that report. So can we look at the minutes, please? Starting on page 3. We looked at the finance scrutiny. Councillor Rebecca Breeze came and spoke, introduced the report and highlighted the salient points. Anything on that page that anyone would like to bring up? Page 5. Anything on page 5? No? Can't see anything. Something that I picked up there, at the bottom of page 5, members queried the potential of paying a national living wage to employees and whether this had been included in the draft budget. Chief Finance Officer advised that there was a provision to pay the national living wage where applicable, but that formal living wage accreditation has not been assumed at this stage. Is there anything that you'd like to comment on with that?
Councillor Davenport's indicating.
Right, Councillor Julie?
Yes, we did ask for that. I thought, maybe I misheard, but I thought that they were going to go with the living wage. I hope it's not just, and I don't mean just in that context, for carers. I know the carers' wages now, I think, the living wage, which is brilliant, but obviously we want it for everyone. And also over the next page, COVID-19 funds in 1, it says, what is the total government COVID grants? And it said the Chief Finance Officer discussed the figures and provided details, although we didn't get all the details that we wanted. That's all I wanted to say there. We asked for a breakdown as to where the funds were going.
That may be in the report, Councillor Davenport. As a,
Didn't see it.
can we look at the breakdown that we've been given in the report at a later stage? And if you're not happy with that, we'll ask for more information.
Okay.
But the Borough Council certainly pays the living wage, is a living wage accredited organisation. Is it something that we feel that we should recommend for the new unitary authority?
Yes.
So any other thoughts on that?
Jane, I
Yes.
have indicated to speak, but I
Oh,
don't
beg
think
your pardon.
I
Right,
have
sorry.
indicated to speak on this in the minutes under the living wage scheme, but I don't think Tracy got my raised hand.
Sorry, Dennis, I have seen your hand. Would you like to make a comment?
Councillor Davenport is dead right. We did from our committee looking at food poverty, we did put in a recommendation which has gone to the executive that they look at the living wage. I have been told when I raised it last time that there is a provision within the budget for the living wage to be implemented. Now, on saying that, I'm hoping that is not going to be lost because that is a serious issue which was made by the committee that looked into food poverty. Mm-hmm. So what I'm hoping, Chair, is that this report, which we put the recommendations, has gone to the executive committee to make sure that is put into the draft budget. I think perhaps Tracy Tiff, the officer, might be able to help on this matter because she was like the facilitator. And I'm hoping that they have had this report. If they haven't had the report, then I think that's got to go to them and they've got to take that on board. So perhaps Tracy can just clarify that they have received that report. Thank you, Chair.
Right. Thank you. Dermot, Councillor Banbridge.
Yeah, it's not actually on the wage issue, it's on another issue. So if you want to clear the wage issue first and come back to me, Madam Chairman, that would probably be the best thing to do.
Thank you. Ken,
yes, thanks, Chair. I just feel, we raised the issue at the last meeting. I don't think the response we got, I mean, it was very much a holding position that all right, that, we hadn't applied for accreditation. I just think that we should be asking for a response. If we haven't applied, if we're not seeking accreditation, why not? Mm-hmm. I think that we're in a position, particularly this year, with all the publicity there has been over the inequalities that have arisen through the pandemic, that if people realize that we have considered the living wage, but we haven't sought accreditation, it won't be just that we haven't done it. It will be extremely bad publicity for the council if it's not seen to be on the side of these people. I just feel that we need to ask for a proper response in this.
Right. Thank you. A little bit more. Right, Andre.
Thank you, Chair. And apologies for a little bit late arrival, just joining from an earlier flooding meeting. I think I'm rather concerned that if we, and I think I'd absolutely endorse Ken Rich's points there, if we do not support the national living wage right across the authority, we absolutely stand to really make a mockery of any arrangements and the actual national living wage, full stop, that are currently in existence in other authorities and those coming towards us. I think it's really important that we work together, that we recognise it. It's there for a particular reason. So I have to say that we should be very clear about wishing to be proactively taking this on board and ensuring that our recommendation, I hope it's collectively unanimous this evening, is taken in all sincerity right across the full authority so that no members of the authority's staff would miss out. No officers would be not applicable, because that's the worst thing you can send out, the message there saying, well, I'm sorry that you're not good enough to receive the national living wage, and therefore you will receive a far lower element. I think that would be the wrong signals and the wrong messages, and I'm sure that nobody would have that intention. So if we can be very clear and say we absolutely do support the national living wage for every employee of the new authority.
Thank you. Thank you. Is that something we can add to the report? Is everybody in agreement on that? Yes.
Come back, because this is quite important. Yeah, this is quite important. I did ask the question of the officer, Tracy Tiff, has the executive had the report from the Food Poverty Committee that we set up? Can she answer that question, please?
Are you okay for me to answer that?
Yes, of course, please do, Tracy.
A report went to Northampton Borough Council's executive recently, and now the report has been to the committee, and they have responded to it. The actions will now be, recommendations will now be actioned, and any responses requested in those recommendations will be actioned. So the response will go out, yes. Okay,
thank you.
Well, in the light of that, I think perhaps we should include that in the report, Tracy. It's something that was brought up.
Chair, may I come in?
Yes, please do.
Just to help clarify matters. So as Tracy said, so the response to the overview and scrutiny, there are a number of overview and scrutiny responses that went to Northampton Borough Council's cabinet last Wednesday. And they will those actions that we can action before vesting day, Northampton Borough Council will do within its budgets. But obviously the remainder will be for West Northamptonshire Council to determine which of those they then take forward beyond vesting day. So we will do all of those actions that we can do within the time that's left, and those that remain will be passed on to West Northamptonshire Council, but it will be for them to determine which of those will be carried forward and funded accordingly.
Right, thank you. George, can I ask if we are able to make a recommendation along those lines?
In terms of which, sorry, because we talked about food poverty report just at the end there, but we were talking previously about the living wage. So just the living wage. I think if you want to add an addendum to your current report, and then if Tracy is then, are we covering the report now, Chair, or are you going to cover? No,
I'm just thinking that we're going through the minutes. But I'm just thinking if we want to pick that up and put it into the report as an addendum at the end of the meeting.
Yeah, that's fine, and this committee approves it, and then that can go on for consideration at the executive and then full council. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Do I have your agreement that we do that at a later stage when we come to look at the report?
Agreed.
Right. Thank you. Thank you for your comments there. Is there anything else in the minutes that we would like to pick up on?
Councillor Davenport and Councillor Bainbridge,
yes,
indicating.
Right. Julie, Councillor Davenport.
Yes, whilst we're talking about pay, it's about the pay rise, because I'm still not 100% what was happening on that. It sounded a bit deja vu, like I said the last time. They said there's some money there and we'll decide. But bearing in mind that we're asking people, and those being officers and workers at the council, to pay 4.99% increase in council tax, and yet for another year, maybe not giving them a pay rise. So I just thought those two could be dealt with together. Living wage. No.
George, do you have any information about that you'd help us with?
Well, there's a danger we're starting to re-scrutinise the scrutiny session that we did 2 weeks ago. Is my only slight concern. We have minutes from that meeting, don't we, for members to comment on, and it's mainly for accuracy as opposed to doing a further scrutiny session. I'll bring in either Andrew or Kath on this, because the minutes are there for approval, and whether there's any corrections that are needed, as opposed to going over the scrutiny when obviously we did spend 2 hours on the draft budget. But Andrew, is my interpretation correct?
I think that's quite correct, George. You know, I think we should be noting these matters for when we actually come to that report itself, and pick it up there and see if there's any amendments you wish to make to that report at that time.
Right, thank you. I think if we just park some of these queries, because I think they do come out later in the report. Anything on page 8? Anybody like to comment on in terms of accuracy? Oh, page 9.
Councillor Bambridge is indicating chair.
Yes, Dermot. Yes, Dermot, please go ahead.
Sorry, Madam Chair, my blue hand keeps disappearing. It's great. I'm not exactly sure which page it should have appeared on, but during the questioning, when I spoke to Martin about.
Oh, Dermot, you've muted yourself. Can you unmute? We can't hear you.
Yeah, I just have unmuted myself. I don't understand that. Sorry.
Right.
Yeah, in the meeting, I asked Martin Henry 2 questions. They're reported in the report as such, but not in the minutes. The first question was regarding the £4 million that we're potentially losing out of because of the pooling situation with NBC, which he indicated that they were sort of working on that one, but I didn't really find out whether that's being fought for. And the second one was relating to the £1 million that's been spent on closing the accounts of the sovereign authorities, and again whether that could be reclaimed from government. Neither of those are mentioned in the minutes, and it is a potential loss, if that's the right word, of £5 million into the coffers of the new authority. So I just felt that they were of significance to be mentioned in the minutes.
Yeah, I think in the report the question of the pooling fund is there.
It's mentioned but not commented on, madam. It just says, bear with me a second. Can't find it for looking now, apologies. I had it a second ago. Here it is. Yeah, it says the Shadow and Overview Scrutiny Committee felt that the pooling of business rates was important and queried if this loss of income could be reclaimed from government. But there's nothing of the response that Martin gave, and equally there's no response to the second point, which is on page 25 of our papers, which says the Shadow and Overview Scrutiny Committee commented about the costs of closing the accounts of the sovereign councils and queried whether these costs could be reclaimed from government. Again, no indication was given as to whether they could or what efforts were being made to try and get that money back again. So it was just those two, Madam Chairman.
Okay, so that's in the report, isn't it?
Yes.
Right. Can we deal with the report and the omissions at a later stage? Because I think we have asked Martin for some further information.
Yes, but should that not be in the minutes, as they were questions that were put as a subject of the actual minutes?
Right. I'm sorry, I can't. I'll have to be guided by you about the cost of closing the funds. I think I have seen that somewhere. Can we check that, Tracy, at some point? Just make sure that question is also in the minutes.
Yes, Chair, I'll check that for you.
Thank you. Thank you. They're very detailed and quite extensive, and it's difficult to ascertain that. Right, thank you, Tracy. Have you got a note of those comments?
Yes, I have got a note of the comments for discussion at the report stage.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Apart from that, is there any other queries over the minutes, the accuracy? No? Okay, Thank you. We'll try and resolve those questions later. Right. What I'd like to move on to is the governance scrutiny and the report that we have from Catherine Whitehead, who is the Director of Legal and Democratic Services. And can I ask you, Catherine, to perhaps introduce the report and to give us some background as to how you set about drafting this governance report? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So you've received a copy of the draft constitution, although we haven't at this stage made it public. I just wanted to set out how we went about the process of preparing this constitution. It obviously provides an opportunity for a council to sort of set a mark and do something different to what it's done before. And with that in mind, I did present a report to the Task and Finish group with a range of options in terms of how we took the drafting of the constitution forward. We have to have a constitution, and members had already looked at the Cornwall one and were quite interested in what that had to offer. But and we had several meetings with the members, but I set out some broad principles because I felt that really if we should start with what it is we're trying to achieve, if you like, with the constitution, rather than just take a model from somewhere. And so you can see at paragraph 3.3 of my report, I set out 6 principles that the Task and Finish group adopted, which were transparency, really important to know how we make our decisions, accountability, so it's important for people to know who it is that's responsible for the decisions that are being made so that they can hold them to account, efficiency, so that the constitution enables us to make decisions in an efficient way, so that the process of making decisions is not an unnecessary burden on the authority. Accessibility, which is really a new one beyond what was in the original model constitution, which is really about making sure that it's accessible and everybody can take part in democracy. Inclusivity is also about accessibility is about making sure that people who have disabilities can read it, or people for whom English is not their first language. Inclusivity is really about making sure that everybody can take part in democracy, and also to some extent that we try and make the constitution as clear and succinct as possible. And one of the other issues that I know that members have picked up as a question was that we agreed in the Task and Finish group that we should aim to have it as far as possible in plain English. Not always easy with drafting a constitution, but that's what we've tried to do. So members adopted a structure to the constitution when I took it forward, which is not the model one. So the DETR back in 2000 set out a model constitution on which most constitutions have since been drafted. But it tends to be difficult to follow because it groups things together by the nature of the document. So it has procedure rules and codes and protocols and function descriptions all grouped in different places. So if you are a member of cabinet, you have to look at the functions, the rules and the codes and protocols in order to understand how cabinet works. So what we decided to do was to design the constitution around the things that people understand. So if people are members of scrutiny, they can look together and see the scrutiny rules alongside the functions of scrutiny, and likewise with the executive. And then they put things to do with officers all together in one chapter, and matters for councillors. So the code of conduct, the protocol for member-officer relationships, and the roles of councillors are set out in the councillors section. And members of the Task and Finish group preferred that approach, and that's the way that we've drafted the constitution. I won't go through each of the chapters because I'm hoping you've seen the report and you've also seen the constitution itself, but I just felt it might be helpful to explain the approach that we took before we started the drafting. It has been through a number of meetings of the Task and Finish group before we came up with the first draft. After you've seen it, we will be talking to the executive about it, and then it will need to make its way through the executive meeting on the 12th of February and a shadow authority meeting on the 23rd of February. And once it's in place, then that will be the constitution that effectively comes into force on the 1st of April. I should say that there is a section in the Constitution that deals with the period of time between the 1st of April and the election. And that is because, as you know, the shadow period under the Structural Changes Order continues. It doesn't come to an end on the 31st of March, it carries on. So the shadow executive will continue to be the decision-making body until the election takes place. But we will need, because the new authorities will take over the functions, we will need some committees, planning committee, licensing committee, in case there's a need for those committees to meet in the intervening period. And so at the back of the Constitution, we have a section 10, which deals with those interim arrangements that will fall away once we've had an election. That was it, Chair. That was all I needed to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Right, do we have any questions?
Councillor Meredith is indicating to speak.
Yes.
Chair.
Councillor Meredith, Dennis.
Thank you, Chair. Over the last 13 years that I've been on the County Council, I've never agreed with what is happening with the Chair of the Council. The Chair of the Council is given to the administration, and I think that is totally unfair. It doesn't give ordinary backbench councillors the chance to take part and to be chair. I don't see why, because we're a new council, I can't see why that can't be changed, because I don't think it's democratic. I think it's totally unfair to the opposition and to the minor opposition parties not to be able to give them a chance of being chair. I think, personally speaking, and I'm not trying to be political on this, I'm trying to talk about fairness and the way it is run. The chair of the administration can, if they want to, direct the meetings to what is actually going on by the administration. Although, in my opinion, some of the chairs have been very favourable and taken a lot of decisions on board. But I think if you look at report from the background 3.11, and I'll just read the first little paragraph out to you. It says, a new council presents a rare opportunity to set out new ways of operating, but also to explain how it intends to operate in a different way so that it encourages public involvement and democratic process. I mean, that to me sums it all up fairly. I think it would be a much fairer way if on the first time in the first year of the administration, if they be chair, then the second will be the opposition, and then the third, the minor thing, and then the fourth come under for the independents. I can't, for the love of me, see why we could not put in a recommendation that takes place. It has been said to me by other councillors from the opposition benches, why is it always the administration? And that works both ways. I mean, it could be Labour, it could be other parties. I won't say Liberal Democrats because some people might smile. But, you know, I think we should be looking at that.
Okay, thank you very much, Dennis. Catherine, Andrew, have you got any comments on that?
Yeah, I mean, every council has a different convention, but it's not something that actually appears in the Constitution. It's a political matter for members how that is determined. I'm absolutely fine about taking that back and raising it with whoever is responsible for the new council when we set the new council up. And obviously that will not happen until the annual meeting after the election. But I've never seen it in a constitution as to what the process is. It's always a political convention within the particular council. And if you want to set up a new political convention, then there's absolutely no reason why you shouldn't do so. But unfortunately, it's not a matter that I could control, because whatever the constitution said, of course, it's up to the leading group how they vote at the meeting. And I couldn't fetter the discretion of the leading group or any councillors as to how they would vote and to which chairman they would elect.
Right, thank you. It's an interesting point. Dermot, Councillor Beveridge.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, just to say, I was very disappointed to reading through the draft document to find there were 4 references to Buckinghamshire Council in it. I know that copying cherry picking is a great idea, but I hope before it goes any further that perhaps those are removed or modified. That was just my comment, Madam.
Thank you.
Yeah, we're doing a proofread. So Andrew was and Paul Hanson and I are going through the whole document and proofreading, and that will be certainly one of the proofreads. I spotted a few other councils as well that we've used, and it is inevitable that you will take documents, and it's not just from Buckinghamshire. There are a number of others as well, but obviously I have come from Buckinghamshire, and Buckinghamshire is the council that's created a unitary just before this this unitary has been created, so it's an example that we've used in a number of areas.
I understand the reasoning, but it's good to get it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. We are doing a complete proofread, divided the whole thing into thirds so that we will read it all through before it goes anywhere. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you for pointing that out.
Right. Ken Ritchie, Councillor Ritchie.
Thank you. I will try to speak quickly, but it is a very, very long document, and I noted down pages of questions, but I have got 4 I can touch on very briefly. The first, my concern, I started looking through this document to see what the pointers were in terms of localism. There's a reference to community forums that is no more than about 2 lines. I think it's about page 18 or something like that. No reference to what they are. A strong hint that they're probably talking shops without any power or any influence whatsoever. And I just felt that that is a huge weakness. It may be the actual structure that the new council will want cannot be determined at this stage. But I would have thought that the constitution should have made it very clear that there would be the right of the council to delegate to groups that were more locally based. So that was one point. I felt that the rules on petitions are very imprecise. Presumably they are spelt out or need to be spelt out somewhere else. I raise it because I've always been exceptionally dissatisfied with Daventry's rules on petitions. That effectively means you can't have a petition. I appreciate that in the allocation of responsibilities to shadow executive members, that yes, that there's a portfolio that includes the words climate emergency. But in the document, there is a section on the policy framework in which climate or climate change doesn't appear at all. And I feel, at the moment that is simply wrong. I know that you might regard it as a policy rather than a category of policies, but given its importance and the importance that we want the new council to be seen as a leader in this field, I felt it should be there. And my final point, I thought that the section on public participation was totally inadequate. I just felt that there should be a constitutional push for the council to say that it will adopt standards that go well beyond the gunning principles about the way in which consultations will, where appropriate, it won't be appropriate in every case, but where appropriate, there is true engagement in involving people in decision making. Thank you.
Right, thank you for those 4 points, Ken. Did you want to come back on any of those, Catherine, at this point?
Yeah, well, in relation to localism, yeah, absolutely. You are quite right that we had a debate about whether or not there was the opportunity to deal with localism now. And, you know, as I said, I come from Buckinghamshire. They did a big project looking at localism during the transition, but they weren't doing it during, you know, the pandemic. So it was very difficult to do the kind of engagement that I would want to do before we would set up local arrangements with the local communities and with the parish councils before we designed whatever localism arrangements we have in place. I'm very aware that, you know, the councils that have gone before, Wiltshire and Bucks and others, have set up, and Durham designed these local area arrangements which have some budget responsibilities and which direct the granting of certain sums of money in order to spend in the local area. And I've certainly talked to the leader about that, and he's keen to see that happening. But what I've put in the constitution at the moment is just the community boards in the structure, because we don't yet know what that's going to look like. And members of the Task and Finish group were members of Northampton Borough, were quite keen to have some sort of theme-based, not just area-based, but theme-based community boards as well. And so because I didn't want to tie it down, I've just called it community boards, and we've been quite broad about the description of it. But it's a piece of work that we certainly would want to do within the first year of the council, assuming we can carry out some sort of consultation or find a way that we can carry out that consultation with the community to deliver that. So this is where I'm going to have forgotten.
Rules of petitions.
Thank you. Yes, petitions. Yeah. Obviously, the petition scheme was something that was introduced by the Localism Act and then promptly repealed. And I think, you know, it's a difficult one as to how you make sure that petitions can be presented in a fair way. I mean, there is a facility for doing that. There's also a facility for a member of the public that does so to speak to the council or to whichever committee it decides to present the petition to. That is in the rules. It is there. But, you know, I think there is scope for putting a petition scheme into the public partition section if we felt that that was appropriate to do that. I don't do it because it's no longer a legal requirement, and many councils find that it can be restrictive to set out a scheme as opposed to just allowing petitions to be presented. At the moment, it isn't very prescriptive, and so that would give quite a lot of flexibility as to how we do it. So I'm quite happy to make it more prescriptive, but obviously that will then mean that there will be some restrictions on the way in which it's done. You also wanted to say that the public participation section itself was inadequate, and I do think that there's scope for pulling more of some of the public participation stuff that's in the rest of the constitution into that first section. We wrote it, and I was very keen to have it in there because it's not in the current constitutions of any of the councils, so it's a new section that we've created. But I agree, there's scope for making it have a little bit more content than it has at the moment. But I think it's important to at least put the marker down that there should be a chapter right up in front on public participation, which is a step forward. And I've forgotten the fourth question, which was?
It's climate change.
Thank you very much. Yes, climate change. It's interesting you say that, and I don't see any reason why it shouldn't be in the policy framework. The documents that are in there, again, what I'm sort of tending to do is stand back and just say, look, I'll do what is the standard, and then obviously it's up to members if they want to put more in. So what's in there are the statutory required policy documents that must be in the policy framework. If there's a strong feeling that there should be a policy written in relation to climate change, or that an existing climate change policy that is already produced by the councils should form part of the policy framework, then I don't have a problem with members raising that within that forum. But obviously it's a decision. It's not a constitutional decision. It's a decision that the councils themselves would have to make, that's what they want to do.
Okay, thank you. Are you okay with any further questions on that, Ken?
Thank you for that explanation. I'm optimistic. I hope there'll be further progress.
Right, thank you. Right, we have a number of questions. Andre, Mike Warren, Julie, and then James Hill. So Andre, if you'd like to ask your question, make your comment.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. May I thank Catherine for a very helpful explanation as to how matters are being dealt with in terms of the construction of the manifesto, I beg your pardon, of the Constitution. Can I just ask, Madam Chairman, are we in possession of any draft Constitution, or am I just considering the pages from 11 to page 20 on our papers this evening?
We were sent a link to the draft Constitution. It has far more pages than I was going to say we have in front of us.
It seemed very light, but okay, I have to say I haven't seen that link, so my apologies there. But if I may make a comment based on conversation, but also based on the report that we have in tonight's papers, which is I feel very strongly that we must have a climate section within the Constitution there. I think it's rather important because we have declared climate emergencies at all councils. So I think absolutely I would support that. The other point really in terms of public participation, young people need to be consulted and need to be involved wherever possible. And I would strongly suggest that if that isn't already included, so forgive me for not having seen that particular piece of it, that we absolutely make sure that that is quite paramount in all our decision-making process, because there currently is a citizen panel that exists in the county, but I do know that there are many young people who would very much want to be part of a decision-making process, and there are ways of consulting them, whether it be through education bodies, schools, etc., or independently of those structures. I think we really should be very clear about the fact that the young people of the county, and particularly of our area, obviously will inherit decisions that we make. And I think it's really important that they don't have to reach a voting age to make that decision. We should be asking them well ahead of that. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you. And there has been quite a lot of discussion at various points about a youth council.
Yes.
So I think that's something. Has that been brought up in your discussions, Catherine?
Sorry, I lost the last part of that because my internet connection went, but I did get the climate and the young people. If anything else was said, I apologize for missing it. So yes, as I said to the previous speaker, I can certainly talk about it in terms of being present in the policy framework and where appropriate in the remainder of the Constitution. In terms of young people participation, yeah, I absolutely agree. And I've done some work in other councils where we've gone into schools and run mock elections and all those sorts of things, which I absolutely think is really helpful to try and get people to engage in what local government is about and what we do. So yeah, I have absolutely no problem with including some section within the public participation section, which acknowledges the importance of engaging with young people as part of the democratic process.
Thank you. Thank you. Mike Warren.
Thank you, Chair. Could we request that the Constitution be written in plain language to promote accessibility and remove any room for interpretation so that members and the officers are clear on the guidance contained in the Constitution? Nice and quick.
Yeah, unfortunately, the two things are not always mutually supportive, if you see what I mean. The trouble is that if you want to get clarity, absolute clarity, then unfortunately you have to use more words and that is where it gets a little bit less like plain English. That's why lawyers write the way we do. But I absolutely agree that the Constitution can be written in a much better way than it has been in the past. And I think that's been the risk, is that it's been written as a legal document rather than as a document which describes to ordinary people how decisions are made, which is what it really should be. And so I have been doing some work going through, as I said, with Andrew and Paul, going through trying to look at what we've already written, in particular the council procedure rules that were very convoluted because they had been sort of lifted and shifted, and we've been sort of pruning them down and trying to find ways of saying the same thing in fewer words. So yeah, I absolutely support that. I think the only counter I would say is that we are running out of time, unfortunately, with writing this constitution. So I think it's an ongoing process that we will need to do past the 1st of April, because we have to get these, we have to get this constitution over the line. But and we have, as you've heard, adopted some parts from other councils just in order to cut the process down. But yes, I absolutely want to keep going and getting the constitution to be a shorter and easier to access document, so that people within the council actually understand what it means, which means they're more likely to follow it, which makes my job easier, of course.
Thank you for that. My experience over the years of being a member, the problems have been around interpretation of the decisions, and I feel if that could be made a lot plainer and a lot easier to actually understand, that would be extremely helpful.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you, Mike. Julie, Councillor Davenport.
Committees, because obviously I was a silent observer, and I did write a report on that, and it came up under standards and democracy, which I thought was quite good. It said the boundary review should not be confined to standards committee. It needs to be widened to include democratic review. Well, that then raised the question at our pre-meet, is that there are boundary review planned? Do we know?
Yes, there will be a boundary review. Whenever there's a move to unitary, there has to be a boundary review, because obviously you become a new council and you have to have the same number of of constituents per councillor within a 10% variance. That's the requirement. So obviously, as soon as you bring councils together, the chances of that variance going beyond the 10% is pretty likely, and that's why there's almost always a boundary review. And I would expect that boundary review would take place before the next election, and then would come into effect at the next election. So when I say that, I mean 2025. So yeah, that's what will happen. I mean, the process for carrying out a boundary review will engage with all members. It's the way that the Boundary Commission do it. So the Local Government Boundary Committee for England do it. They basically will ask anybody to make submissions. They will look at both the council size, i.e. how many members should there be on the council, and then what the individual ward boundaries will be, so that they achieve this consistency across the representation of the area within a 10% variance. And it's a two-stage process, and there's a lot of public consultation as well as a lot of engagement with members and the opportunity for all parties to make submissions. What we're talking about in terms of the Standards Committee is just making sure that the process is managed from our point of view, so that we are telling members what's happening, and we're engaging with a group of members who understand what the process is. But it's largely run by the Boundary Committee for England.
And another question was about a board that didn't come up actually when we discussed it, or you discussed it, was the Section 106 board.
You'll have to help me with that one. Sorry, I don't know what a Section 106 board is.
Does that belong with the report at the end, Julie?
No.
I expect you mean a planning?
No, no, because I've been told that we do have a Section 106 board, but I've only found that out recently, and I've been a councillor for nearly 6 years. And I was wondering, when we went through all the different boards, committees, etc., forums, that didn't come up. And it seems as though it's a surprise to you as well then. Yeah, Section 106.
Well, I don't know, Section 106 of what?
Board, to be able to, I think it's just officers, because councillors don't seem to know about it, decide where Section 106 money is going to be spent.
Oh, right, so planning, yeah. Yes, I think you're right. It's an officer board, and it would be not within the Constitution, because the Constitution primarily deals with the overarching governance framework, i.e. the way that members make their decisions. The delegations to officers are just a list of things that officers can do in their sort of day-to-day business affairs. It doesn't deal with all of the things, like you won't find the management team, for instance, in there, the council's overarching management team. You won't find all of the other officer boards. It doesn't describe officer arrangements, because they're just how the council organises itself. It's not part of its governance arrangements in that sense.
Okay, and when it comes to the finance protocols, etc., I haven't seen those yet. So they're to follow, are they, with the scheme of delegation?
I thought the finance procedure rules were in the draft that was circulated. So the finance procedure rules appear in section 9, as do the contract procedure rules. I thought they were in the draft that you were sent.
Maybe. Oh, well, I better check that then, because I'd seen the contract ones, but I hadn't seen.
Right. Well, if not, they are available, so I can make them available to you, and I'm certainly happy to send them out after the meeting.
Please.
I'll check what was sent, and if you haven't had it, then I will make sure the meeting gets the finance ones.
But it's just about how do we question those if we haven't seen it? Because a lot of members didn't, well, most of us didn't get the Constitution draft until Friday evening, and then of course there's the weekend, and so it was difficult, you know, to really go through it. So can we then send questions to you? Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as I said, we are on a very tight timescale. I arrived in the authority in November, and you know, it's quite a short period to be between November and February to be writing an entirely new constitution for a new council that I've only obviously just become part of. So it's been quite a challenging time frame, even though I know work had taken place before I arrived. So yeah, absolutely. If you've got additional comments, as I said, the papers go out to the executive on the 4th of February. So anytime before then, I'm happy to take on board comments.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hill, James.
Thank you, Chair. My question is around committees again, specifically Planning Committee. I'm sorry if I may have missed this, but I know there was talk at the start about having possibly regional planning committees that still worked around the current borough and district boundaries. Is that the case, or are we looking at one planning committee to cover the entire West Northants unitary?
No, there's a proposal for 3 local area planning committees and 1 strategic planning committee, which would deal with the sort of major development and waste disposal type planning, and 1 or 2 other matters. I mean, the terms of reference are described, but it's that's the strategic one. And then the local area ones will be largely similar to the sort of local area planning committees that exist at the moment, but without those strategic responsibilities. And they will be based around the existing district councils. And part of the reason for that is obviously that the policy, the local plan, which is the policy framework within which planning decisions are made, will continue to be separate until we can develop a single local plan for the area of West Northants.
That's great. And just finally, would one assume then that councillors who are within those borough and district areas would be the ones who'd sit on those district planning committees then? As in, you wouldn't necessarily want a South Northants councillors necessarily sitting on a Daventry planning committee. Is that how it would be? Would that be somewhere that would be regulated as such?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I think there was a little bit of a concern at the beginning that if they had to be politically balanced. Well, they don't. Area committees don't have to be politically balanced. So yes, you're absolutely right. The purpose of them being local will be that they will be with local member representation.
That's great. Thank you.
I have a question actually about planning, because you've got the strategic planning committee and you've got the local ones. Can the strategic planning committee override decisions made at the local planning committees?
No, they're not. It's not a senior committee. It's simply a committee with different decision-making powers. So there will be powers delegated to the strategic planning committee, and there will be powers delegated to the local planning committee, and that's it. The one won't override the other. The decision of a local planning committee can be appealed in exactly the same way as it is at the moment, but it can't be overridden by the strategic planning committee.
Chair, it's Ken Pritchard here. I'm sorry I can't put my hand up. So
I'm sorry, Ken.
As I say, it doesn't appear on my screen. A couple of questions actually is with regards to, first of all, will there be sort of an executive summary or in fact perhaps a reference guide? Because obviously the Constitution will be quite a meaty document, and perhaps it will be something where quick reference can be made, and I see the Constitution as a reference document. And secondly, what happens if and what the process is when the new council is set up, that you want to make amendments to the Constitution? What process actually is involved?
Okay, so the first chapter of the Constitution is called the Summary and Explanation, and it is an attempt to give an overview of the decision-making arrangements. It doesn't attempt to summarise the Constitution, because I think that would be a task beyond. Yeah. But what it does do is describe in a brief and accessible way how the council operates, so that anybody who doesn't understand local government and is a member of the public or whatever, and just wants to know who makes what decisions, they can just pick that bit up. And that will obviously be something that we put on our website in a bit more about, with a bit more of an illustrated explanation. And I didn't take a note of the second question.
With regards to once a council has been set up and you want to make amendments to
yes. So there are two ways to amend the Constitution. One is that obviously if decisions are made by bodies that affect the Constitution, so for example the executive makes decisions which are executive, and all of the functions that sit within the council which are executive sit only with the executive. They don't sit with, this is a myth that goes on that things sit with council and then get delegated to the executive. They don't. Statute gives powers directly to the executive. So if it decides, for example, that it doesn't want to have 9 portfolios anymore, it wants to have 5, then it will make that decision itself, and then I will change the Constitution. And there's a statement within there that says the monitoring officer can give effect to a decision that's already been made. It's called a consequential amendment, but basically, any amendment that's made lawfully, then I will give effect to it. And likewise, if the law changes nationally and something that means that I have to do something, then I will change the Constitution to do that. And then at the next meeting of the council, I will report that I've made that change to give effect to something. But if a change wants to be made to the Constitution, you say to me, well, actually, I think we really need to do a scrutiny review, and then other members agree with you and a decision is made to conduct a scrutiny review, then the idea is that will be done through the Standards and Democracy Committee, and they would then make recommendations to the full authority to say, this is what we recommend as the new way forward, and all members would have the opportunity, obviously at that point, as you are now, to comment on and to be consulted about those changes.
And very quickly, the last question that came up with regards to planning, can committee members sit on both of those panels, i.e. the local one and the national and the county one?
And the strategic one,
yeah.
There's no prohibition on that, no.
So you can sit on both?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Right, we have 3 more questions, and I think we ought to bring this part of the meeting to an end. Ken, Richie, Dennis, and then Dermot. Ken.
Thank you. My question follows up the last question that Ken Pritchard has raised, as well as a point you raised yourself, Chair, about how these planning committees will relate. I note it refers to them in the draft constitution, but it doesn't actually say how they relate to each other. I mean, my concern here is, are we going to have area planning committees that will deal with the conflicts you get between neighbours when somebody wants to put up a bigger garage or something? Mm-hmm. That will be dealt with locally. But if somebody else wants to put a bloody great big warehouse in the middle of the town or alongside where they live, that will not be dealt with locally. And I just feel that there has got to be some way in which we ensure that there is a strong local voice that goes in to planning decisions, which which have local impact, lots and lots of local impact, but because they're regarded as perhaps strategic for the authority, they're dealt with in a different way. And I just feel that we need to make sure that the Strategic Planning Committee does not lessen the voice or the opportunities for local communities and indeed for local councillors to, to argue the, the interests of their areas.
Yes, interesting point.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the point is that the definition of major development, which is the definition we've used for the Strategic Planning Committee, is the definition that's within the planning legislation. So it's not a sort of, oh, well, we quite like the Strategic Planning Committee to deal with this because we think it's a bit nutty. It's a definition that's set out there. And the reason why we've used that definition, the reason why we create the Strategic Planning Committee is because it will have implications for the whole authority and beyond the boundaries of the local area. So it's important that more than one. So if you do something like a major road development, it doesn't just impact on the place where that road is, it also impacts on the places that feed in and out of that road. So that's why it's really important that there's more members than the local members have an input to that decision. But of course, 1/3 of the members on the planning committee is quite likely to be, or a proportion of them, depending on how many from each area, on that strategic committee. So it won't lose the voice. There will still be representatives from each of the local areas on that strategic committee, but there, not necessarily in direct proportions, but there will be representatives. But so there is the opportunity for it. But I think it's right that there should be some place where the wider implications can be considered.
Can I just answer my question though? Would it not make more sense, would you not consider a case where if there is a large development taking place in an area that's considered as something that is strategic, the application will be, the final decision on the application will be taken by the Strategic Planning Committee. But is there not a case for saying that at least the local planning committee ought to be in a position in which you can express a view on the development, in the same way as a town council or a parish council might express a view even at present? That, if there is something that is there, there should be an opportunity that local members should not find that they're in the position of being able to take decisions on the very mundane issues that tend to be referred to planning committees, but have not got the same say if it is something that really is going to have a major impact on their divisions. It just strikes me as being wrong in principle.
I think it creates difficulty if one part of the council starts to make representations as a committee to another part of the same council. You can see the difference between a parish council, which is a separate legal entity, because it would have the effect of seeking to, of potentially judging and unduly influencing the committee that has to make its decision in a quasi-judicial fashion. That's not to say that the members of the committee, of course, won't have exactly the same rights as they have at the moment to attend that planning committee, to speak, there'd be an opportunity for public speaking at that meeting and for member speaking, which already happens, as you know, with local members. So there would be that opportunity. And obviously, if the development fell to one particular area, then that would be the members that would be, entitled to go along and speak. But if not, then the potential for those members to sort of talk together and say, well, we'd like to send somebody to go along to represent this little area and speak, then that was no reason why that shouldn't happen. But I wouldn't want to do that as a formal committee, because I think it would start to look like the authority was predetermining its own decision in a sense.
Yeah. Okay. Right.
Sorry,
on that. Sorry, Andrew.
On that point as well, I draw members' attention to the planning protocol as well, which actually sets out how members can get involved in pre-application matters, and also sets out the role of ward members as well. So there are specific categories in there which should also help with involvement in these type of planning matters.
Yeah, and I think getting involved in pre-planning is really, really important for local voices to be heard. And decisions to, or compromises to be made before before projects and developments come forward that really do affect local people adversely. Yeah, excellent. Any more comments? Any more questions? Dermot. And then Dennis, and then I think we must, oh, and Julie, then I think we must.
Yeah, this is in connection with the length of meetings. I appreciate that it's a great skill of chairing and agenda writing, but I understand there have been discussions as to putting a guillotine on meeting times, etc., particularly full council meetings. And I just sort of wanted to express my concern that you don't get to sort of 8:30 in the evening with half an hour to go and you've still got two of the most important agenda items to discuss. And I just wondered what the proposal is for that. I had a quick look through the papers sent, but I couldn't actually find anything that was very concrete in that respect. Thank you.
So so we've just actually changed the proposal. I think it was 9:30 coming out of the working group, and we've just changed it. It hasn't gone back to the working group yet, so it may yet change. But it went to 10:30, and also we've put some further limitations on the amount of speakers that can speak, because obviously the concern is that if you make the first part of the meeting when people can come along and speak too big, then as you rightly say, it's very difficult to get through the business. So there is a provision to decide what to do for the chairman at that particular point, and also a discretion for the chairman to extend it by a further 15 minutes, so that if an item, there's only one item left and we just want to make sure that item is dealt with and it will take 15 minutes, then that chairman has the discretion to do that. But I think beyond 10:30, it gets to the point where people, it becomes difficult for people to remain and stay and take part in the meeting effectively if they've been going for 4.5 hours.
So the onus is to get the important business early in the agenda if it's likely to be a long meeting, I guess.
Well, hopefully there won't be too many meetings that go on for more than 4.5 hours.
I think we've all sat in them in the past, one way or another. I know Andre has it and Seaman nodding rapidly.
Right, Dennis, did you want a quick question, or have you changed?
I do, Chair.
Right. You've muted yourself, Dennis. Can you unmute, please?
That's it.
That's it, yes.
I was glad that Councillor Davenport brought the issue up of 106. I've been on the Northampton Planning Committee. I was on there for at least 10 years and also on the county for about 10 years. And the thing is, in my opinion, there's no planning board, but you do have a 106 officer who is responsible for dealing out the 106 officer. It's always been a controversial thing, 106 money, because a lot of the 106 money gets lost into the main budget because it never gets used. And it does help local councillors to be able to improve their area if they can actually get hold of the 106. So what I'm suggesting is that this ought to be discussed in more fully operational, because what happens if you're on the planning committee, they just say to you, oh, there's so much money for 106. And then it's up to if you've got a councillor who's got his ear to the ground, to make sure that he can actually get hold of some of that 106 money. So there is a point here. I think it really needs to be looked at, because it's one way of improving the area where you represent by getting that money.
Mm-hmm. I think Andrew brought this up. He had a comment on that. And as I understand it, the pre-planning that councillors are going to get involved in involves the discussions between the developer, the planners over the 106, and how that is the section 106 money, and how that is going to be spent within the area of the planning application. So I think the intention is that there will be discussions, pre-planning discussions, and that's when the council will have a chance to have an input into where that money is spent.
That's brilliant. If that's going to happen, that will save a lot of controversy.
Yeah.
The thing, because as I say before, I've known that I've lost 106 money and it's gone into the main budget because it never gets spent.
That's right. That's right. To avoid all that, I think. Right. Julie, Councillor Davenport.
Just one question. How is the unitary expecting to be able to manage 93 councillors, you know, with meetings? And I didn't know, because I don't remember that being discussed.
Yeah, that's a very good question, and one that I don't think has been entirely addressed yet. I mean, we have identified that there is a council chamber that would facilitate 93 members, but it doesn't allow for public attendance, which of course is a requirement. And the other thing that really needs to be, we haven't yet resolved is what happens when the regulations are changed. So currently we have, as you appreciate, regulations in place which allow us to hold meetings in the way that we are tonight, but those regulations run out on May the 7th, and if they're not renewed, then we will need to revert to being able to hold meetings as we did before, and we would need to consider issues like webcasting for the new council, which would be something that I'm sure we would want to do after this experience where people have got used to being able to view meetings remotely. So yeah, this hasn't been addressed at the moment, partly because obviously we have got the regulations and it buys us a little bit of time to do that, because we're able to continue meeting in the way that we are at the moment. But absolutely, yes, it's something that we are looking at now, and we've been discussing it in the last few weeks as to how we make sure that we are preparing for that change.
Right, thank you. Right, final question, Andre.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. In terms of voting at meetings, I think it's very important that we have some clarity on how that's going to be established, because in some councils electronic voting has taken place, in others it has been very much a matter of sort of raising the hand. And I think it does help also officers to have either a recorded system or an element of them being able to accurately minute the decision that's been taken at the meeting, etc. Can we have some clarity on the direction of that? And in terms, Madam Chairman, of meeting places, I'm familiar with most of the council structures across the east of England, and I do know that we have also other buildings. They're not necessarily council buildings where council meetings can be held, and I'm indicating something like the theatres or the university, places of that nature that can be accessed and would very comfortably also accommodate members of the public to join in to those meetings. So I would like some flexibility being part of that consideration, and that it shouldn't be limited solely to council meetings. To council buildings. I think that would be better off for everyone.
Okay, so I mean, it says show of hands at the moment because that's the facilities that we would have available. We don't have an electronic voting system in place, although if we are looking at new webcasting systems, then obviously they come quite often with those kind of additional facilities, depending on what sort of package you buy. As to looking at alternative buildings, well, I have run meetings in alternative buildings. The difficulty is that you can't put your own webcasting facilities in there, for one thing, and the second thing, of course, which means you have to hire in the webcasting if you're going to do webcasting, and you have to hire the building as well. So there are significant cost implications generally in running meetings on a regular basis out of another site other than one which you have control over. So those are the reasons why councils generally don't do that. I mean, obviously with unitary, in a number of areas they've had to do that because they haven't had facilities large enough to do it, and they may well have to do that in the north because they don't have a facility large enough, but the cost implications are quite significant. So it's something that we seek to avoid if we possibly can.
Thank you. Right, if there are no more questions, I think we move on to item number 7, which is the draft budget report. And thank you very much indeed, Catherine and Andrew. If you would like to go and do something else, just enjoy the rest of your evening, feel free. there's no reason for you to perhaps stay on for this next part. And we thank you very much for your contribution and your attendance.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The members for the. I've taken away a lot of comments which will be really helpful, and I will put into the constitution, and we'll make some, useful changes. So thank you very much.
It's been really interesting, really enlightening as well. So thank you for your very clear explanations. Thank you. Right, on to item number 7. This is the report of the West Northamptonshire Shadow Overview and Scrutiny Committee on the budget consultation. This is the draft general fund and the HRA budget. This is what we were looking at the last meeting, and a number of points have been brought up during the approval of the minutes. So if we're able to go through this, it's really just to make sure that we are happy with this report. If there's anything we want to add, we did ask earlier for Martin Henry to get back, if he was able to, with some of the questions that are outstanding. And I don't know if Tracy's managed to contact Martin. Could I ask you if you managed to do that, Tracy?
I did, Chair, after the pre-meeting, but it was getting on for 6 o'clock, so it was quite late when I did contact Martin. But as soon as we have received a response, I will make sure you have that sight of that.
Right. Do we need to agree this tonight then, Tracy, or can we agree it up to a point, and then when we get the responses from Martin, make a final agreement?
I think you'll have to make the majority of your decisions now, because this report is then going to be appended to Martin's big report that's going off to the West Northampton Shadow Authority.
Right. How would we do this then, Andrew? Do you have a suggestion?
Chair,
Oh, you've muted yourself, Andrew. Come back.
yeah, sorry, I'm having problems this end. That's why my video keeps going. Chair, I think it depends on what matters actually come out from today, from this meeting here, whether or not they can actually then be put into the amended report. If you've got things outstanding, and again, I don't know what the turnaround time for this is, Tracy, but it could be.
Oops, lost you completely, Andrew.
I think Andrew's left. As soon as he comes back, we'll let him back in.
Yes. George, do you have any thoughts about how we could go forward with this?
Well, I suppose it depends. There's a danger that we try and write a report in the meeting, which I probably wouldn't advocate. I suppose it's what additional items you do want to add that aren't already covered in the report. Mm-hmm. I think the committee could give a delegation to you to finalise the report after this meeting, to enable for you to, if you like, to listen to the comments that are going to be made now, and for you then to exercise chair's discretion, as I say, through a delegation from this meeting to add items that you listened to this evening. But otherwise, there's a danger, Chair, that we could be rewriting the report in the committee, which is the committee's function. So that's my only health warning, really. But certainly members can comment on this report, and if they feel there are elements missing, as Councillor Bambridge was referring to earlier, then that can be added to.
Mm-hmm. Right, Mike Warren, Councillor Warren, you have a hand up.
Yeah, just a quick one, actually. I think probably, George, you could probably answer this. Yeah. Right. There's been a phrase used a great deal, which is safe and legal. We're now getting safe and legal plus. Any idea? Can you explain that at all?
Yes, I can, Councillor Warren. So the plus element. So if you remember, originally we were planning to do fairly significant transformation. Then the COVID pandemic struck, and as a result of that, we had to scale back the levels of transformation that was being planned between now and go live on the 1st of April. So the plus element does refer to an element of transformation, which is predominantly the transformation that's taken place in adult social care, which and the new operating model that has been developed and went live on the 1st of October last year. And also the establishment of the Children's Trust is the other element of the plus, which obviously was established, well, not obviously, it was established on the 1st of November last year. So they're the two elements of the much wider transformation plan that was originally planned to take place. As I say, significant parts of that had to be scaled back because of the COVID pandemic, and resources quite rightly being diverted to manage that. But those two key elements around adult social care and children's have been undertaken. So that's the plus element. So hopefully that explains that, Councillor Warren, for you.
Yes, it does, George. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
It's Ken Pritchard here again. Sorry, I've had to interrupt, but obviously I can't use the.
I'm sorry, Ken. I didn't see your hand. Yes.
What it actually is that it's particularly with regards to page 24, the transformation, where we're allocating 2.9 million plus 52, which includes 52 members of staff. One of the things I'm quite concerned about is that there doesn't seem to be a guillotine or an end process of this. I would have thought that transformation, you actually end up with a situation where you don't need transformation. And when you look at particularly the expenditure of 2.9 million, I would like to at least see that there's an end date with regards to that. And secondly, I did notice that there's a budget of 500,000 with regards to efficiency. I'm quite concerned that there is the sign off on this actually is in fact with the Director of Finance and the Director of Transformation. I would have thought that there should be some other input, perhaps from councillors or from some other finance committees to approve these sort of expenditures.
Yes, I do remember that point being brought up actually previously. Right. Seems to be a number of points that people do wish to just either add or get a little bit more information on. Can we go through this? Andrew, you're back again.
Yes, I am. I had a message for House removed me from the meeting, so I don't know what I said wrong, but
do you have any suggestions as to how we amend this? George has suggested that the points that are brought up tonight, I can approve if you delegate to approve those, to include them, and that we actually make some decision as to how far we want to agree this evening, and then leave the other matters for myself to just confirm.
yes, that is what I was saying when I was cut off. Actually, I think that is the way forward. You can make the changes you wish to now. So, you had something there from Councillor Pritchard. He was talking about member involvement in the Investor Save. Well, if you wish, put that in your report. I do know that going back to the last meeting, I do remember the conversation about this, that it would be the Director of Transformation with the Section 151. But if members felt strongly about that, then that is something you would put in the report to then be considered by the Shadow Executive.
Right. Is it agreed that we add that to the transformation section?
Agreed.
Yes.
Agreed.
Thank you. Right. So can we have some wording on that, Tracy, we can add to the report at a later stage?
Yeah, sure, Chair. Do you want me to sort of work with you on the wording?
Yes, yes. I think we've got. I think we understand what everybody wants to say about that. Thank you.
Sorry, Chair. With regards to the transformation budget, is there any decision on that at all? Do we consider that, or should we actually request that there should be an end date?
George, you've got a comment there.
Yes, through you, Chair. So, Councillor Pritchard, from from memory from the meeting a couple of weeks ago, I recollect that Jane Carr, who's the Director of Transformation, stated that I think the plan was that there will be a number of fixed-term contracts for those staff that will be going into the transformation team. So there was an anticipation that there would be a start and an end, although in reality, transformation is fairly continuous in local government in terms of the way it needs to keep reinventing the way that it delivers services to achieve better outcomes for the people of West Northamptonshire. But we can, again, through you, Chair, we can double check that and put a footnote to that particular point, if that would help members.
Thank you. David.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just on that point, I did question Jane at the time because I'm concerned, one, with the size of the budget as it's ongoing. I asked the question about that when it came to an end, and she said that it was an ongoing project, and that so yeah, basically it's going to continue was what she actually answered, if I recall correctly. And I'm surprised at that because, as George has kindly said, local government is transformation. That's what you're doing all the time. But it seems very odd to me. I understand having a transformation project team for us forming the unitary, but I really don't understand why we would be looking at a budget, a specified budget for doing what we're supposed to do. So I'm very uncomfortable with that, and I'm also quite uncomfortable with the amount we seem to be having there, particularly if it's ongoing at 2.9 million, because that equates to £55,000 per seat, which seems quite high to me. Maybe I'm just out of kilter with salaries and things, but that does seem exceptionally high.
Clearly, yes, George.
I was going to say just to provide a bit of clarification for Councillor Smith. That will of course include on costs, which equate to about 25% on top of salary costs. So what I mean by on costs is national insurance payments, the employer contributions, and any pension contributions, again employers. So we have to factor in a sort of an additional 25% on any salaries that are paid, just to give a bit of context. So they would include all of those costs.
I appreciate that, but it is still quite high, and we are here to get value for money and protect the purse for the public.
Right. We've got a number of people, I guess, wanting to come back on this one. Andre.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A question reference page 27 or 4, the Children's Trust areas, where we're discussing that there is a budget of 136.37 million for the Children's Trust, and obviously wording that's been linked to that. My concern really, Chair, is that there needs to be some fiscal controls that we're aware of, rather than it just being a separate trust that have their own controls, which I appreciate. There is a concern that clearly they receive passported funds from the central budgeting process, of which 76.01 million, I believe, is coming from the West, or on that, the approximate share. And I would like to see that there was member accountability within that environment. And I appreciate it is a trust that is already established, but this does not stop us from putting forward the fact that there needs to be direct member involvement with this, because I can see this slipping out all too easily. And there has been a great deal of experience in children's areas, not just in our county, but in others too, gaining huge costs and tremendous burdens. So I would say something along the lines of accountability and controllability of budgets needs to be member scrutinised, or needs to have member involvement, and therefore we can have accountability on that basis. But I think it does also need to be measured, and I think it needs to have prior agreed, if you like, principles in terms of golden rules on finance, etc. So I'm not sure at what point that can be drawn into, Madam Chair, but I think it has to be said in our report that we would wish to be absolutely involved with member accountability. Otherwise it becomes a body which is just out of reach, if you like, and dictated otherwise.
I think the Director of Children's Services, Cathy Hadley, has the monitoring of this these service level agreements. Very, that is a huge part of her job. If I recall correctly, there are possibly 2 officers on the board of the trust and the portfolio holder for children's services. I think those are the sort of checks and balances in terms of the board. And I guess they will have to produce reports back to council, the full council.
I mean, could we ask, Madam Chair, that those reports are more than just the annual report and we're just effectively explained what they've been doing? I think we would be wanting to have a much more regular engagement, certainly the first 12 months or first 24 months of it probably, to understand the impact of that. Yes,
I think the board meets monthly to start with and then quarterly. George, do you want to come in here?
Chair, as you would imagine, there's been a lot of work done around Children's Trust and accountability and governance. May I suggest that we do a separate briefing note that goes round to scrutiny members, which just gives some comfort and reassurance of the level of governance that does surround this, because I know we actually haven't covered it under this scrutiny timetable, but there just to reassure members, there, as you would expect with something as important as this, there's a significant level of governance and assurance wrapped around it. So if I may take this to, as you say, Chair, Kathy, who's the Director of Children's Services, and we'll get a briefing round for members to provide that assurance.
Yes. Overview and Scrutiny at the county have done an enormous amount of work on the Children's Trust, the setting up of it. So I think that would reassure us if that went round as a briefing note to members here. Thank you. Right. Are there any other points that we would like? At the end of page 28, other issues raised. I think this is where we are wanting some responses from Martin, just to clarify points that have not been answered in the report. So Julie, you had a comment?
Yes, I have 3 of them. I think that we asked for, that's the section 106 funding, detailed in the capital programme, for each authority, how much and, etc. They said they'd be able to give me a list. The other was the school, well, which I believe could be the school transport issue again, under the 128,000 saving against transport optimisation.
Yes.
And also when it comes to COVID, I know they've told us how much each authority has got, but it doesn't give us any breakdown of the spending.
That's true. I would imagine that'll come later. I mean, it is still it's ongoing, isn't it? There's a lot of spend that is still happening, and at some point there will be, the accounts will be presented.
Yeah.
George has got his hand up again here. So
sorry, just through you, Chair, just to provide some clarity. So each of the authorities will have its COVID-19 funds, and obviously there are different tranches of funding that each that apply to different elements. The majority of which need to be accounted for in this financial year. So it will be the responsibility of the sovereign councils, the county council, and the 3 district and borough councils to account for that, and that is clearly documented in each of the sovereign councils in terms of spend this year. Obviously, in terms of monies that then carry forward into April 2021 and beyond, that will be the responsibility of West Northamptonshire Council, and that is being separately accounted for. So at the moment, it's all being managed by the respective sovereign councils, actually, and most of it is if you like, has a cut-off point of the 31st of March 2021 to tie in with the financial years for each of the local authorities.
So we'll have a better idea then, will we?
So if you wanted to know for any of those councils, we all report slightly differently the way that monies are being spent. So as you know, for Northampton Borough Council, we take a report every other month to our cabinet, and within that is the detail of how those COVID monies are spent. Obviously, it'll be slightly different, I'm sure. It's South Northants, Daventry, and the County Council, but each will be showing that the levels of spend. Councillor Davenport, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. We've had a question from Dermot, Ken, and then David Smith. I think you have your hand up.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Yes, just on that final point, yes, at South Northants, we're still getting a lot of claims coming in at the moment, but the last tranche was only announced last week, I think it was. And we're going out actively trying to get people who can claim it, and we've obviously got to process those claims. So yeah, as George says, you know, it's an ongoing process, and you know, as the tiers change, so do the quantities and the qualifications. So that's something that's going to have to be left for a while now, but it's a very important part of our work just now. But just coming back, Madam Chair, to the 2 points I came up with earlier. Sorry, bang on about these, but they were pointed out to me by members, other members, that this £5 million that we can't claim at the moment, or in process of claiming, particularly the closing of the accounts for the sovereign councils. This is something that the whole process has forced upon all the districts and the borough and the county council to wind up their books, etc. And it's £1 million, and I feel that's something we really ought to push central government to fund for us, in particular. And certainly the situation, it's a historic one, but it's one that's come to bite us in the legs, which is the business rates pooling, which we got into some years ago. Unfortunately, the borough didn't at the time, for I'm sure very good reasons, but it has now come round and causing us a shortfall of, I believe, George will probably correct me here, of about £4 million, that had everyone been in the pooling, we would have got that. And I still think that's something that's worth fighting our corner for, if that is possible. And I'd just like to sort of, if members agree, to sort of push those forward as potential financial sources that I feel we're due, rather than anything else. I mean, it's £5 million. It's a lot of money.
Yes, yes, indeed. And I do recall that they were both those points were brought up in the previous meeting. So again, maybe we can word that, Tracy, agree some wording and add that in to as an appendage to this.
That would be very kind of you, because obviously a lot of people will only be able to refer to these pages in their knowledge of the discussions that we had. So it's important that we highlight the areas that we wish to highlight, if everyone's in agreement.
Right, thank you.
Thank you.
Chair, if I could very quickly, I noticed within the report that it does talk about the closing of the accounts. It doesn't mention the figure, so I think that could be very easily put in.
Yes. It's just maybe filling in some of these gaps that we haven't quite got the figures for, that obviously people are bringing forward now.
It does make people take notice if the size is that big. Yes,
it is a considerable amount of money, right? In the issues raised, I think fees and charges finally were finalised. Will they be shared with the members? So that's one question we want to get an answer for. Mention the transport optimisation. Calculation on aggregation savings will be shared with members. It's another bit of information we need. We've talked about the 106, and I think, Ken, this evening you brought up about the consultation and the levels of engagement with public, which is possibly more to do with the governance and the constitution finding the right sort of method of consulting. Ken, do you want to come back on that?
If I can, sorry, let me drop that hand because I put it up for another purpose. I mean, I think that the issue is a slightly different issue that I think came up with this. I would love to think that we could be moving to be pioneers in participatory budgeting of this type that many people have studied and put forward their ideas on. But even if we can't, my concern is we've had a budget, or still having a budget consultation, in which the questions that people will want to ask about the budget don't appear and can't be answered by it. The budget consultation strikes me as being almost entirely about what is the overall size of the budget and therefore how much tax will be paid, about tax harmonization, about other benefits. It doesn't answer the questions that people want to know. Will there be money to keep my library open? Will we get the bus routes reinstated? All of these things, what will there be money for? And I just feel that having a consultation that doesn't actually talk to people in terms of what services they want. Okay, if they're asking for services, then it's got to be related to how much are they willing to pay. But none of that discussion is there within the consultation document. It seems to me purely about, are you happy about this amount of money that will be the size of the budget? And there's no real alternative if you're not happy what you do.
Is that not more about the design of consultations? And
there's a much wider issue too, I agree.
Yes,
yeah.
Yes. And I think that was touched on earlier when Catherine was talking about engagement with the public. And I think you made your point very well then, that the consultation process needs to be more robust, it needs to be more inclusive, and it needs to be more directed to people's needs and wishes, if you like, rather than are you happy with, or so can we leave that as part of governance, part of the constitution? Right, thank you. Right, any more comments about this report?
Nobody else is indicating, Chair.
Okay. Right, are you happy then if there are some amendments made and you delegate me to approve the wording of those? I will run them past people that should have a look at them first in terms of our officers, and we'll make sure that all your points, all your comments have been included. And thank you very much for that. I think there's been some very very important additions to the report. Thank you. Right, can we move on to the executive floor plan? George is here with us. So George,
I am. It's just the joys of working from home. I've notified from my daughter, my wife's badly cut her hand, so I need to go downstairs and deal with that, if that's okay. So
please do. Yes, George.
Can I hand over to Andrew just to cover this final item, if that's okay, Andrew?
Yes, I forgot to say that Councillor Adam Brown gave his apologies for tonight's meeting because his wife's having a baby. So I think we can leave George to look after his wife's cut hand as well. Absolutely. So Andrew, could you just perhaps take us through the forward plan, what we are looking at in the future?
Yep.
Thank you.
So we have the forward plan well, I have it in front of me here. So February 21st, the Shadow Executive will be looking at the Programme Director's update and budget monitoring report. And importantly, following off on the item we've just had here as well, we'll be looking at the annual budgets and the medium-term financial plan, including the report that you've just discussed now. The other major item for them is also the Constitution, which we're looking to take to the Shadow Executive on the 12th of February. And there's also a number of policies there as well. So there's quite a few policies there. Right at the beginning of this process, I set out which policies were actually required by law and what were required by the regulations. But it's pleasing to note that there are also a number of other policies where the programme is looking to make sure that there is one rather than having four to look at in some places. Then in March, more policies again there, looking to make sure that they are in place, and also to finish off the customer experience strategies that came to overview and scrutiny 2 or 3 meetings ago now, as well as the insurance and the details of the insurer and the costs of that. So Chair, that was all I wanted to mention about the forward programme, the forward plan.
Right, thank you. One thing that was brought up at the last meeting was attendance at the Task and Finish group for the website for the customer communications, and I think Councillor Hill and Councillor Roberts showed an interest in that. Do we have any movement on that, Tracy? Have the 2 councillors been able to attend a meeting?
I need to check with the councillors. Councillor Birch.
Councillor Hill is here, I think. Maybe not. Maybe just his photograph. Yes, we'll check with that, because I think that was one of the things that we. There's a lot of interest in that Task and Finish group and the work that they were doing. Right. We have one more meeting, and that is the 2nd of March. That is scheduled to be a sort of mopping up meeting where we go through the work that we've done, we produce a final report, and any recommendations based on the reports that we've already produced. One thing that George did suggest that we might want to invite Jane Carr, who's Director of Transformation, back for a very brief update on day 1 readiness. It seems as if, before we go to vesting day in April, it would be of interest to us, and I think bring the work we've done to some sort of conclusion, to find how we are how the position that we're in as we move towards day 1. Is that something that people would feel would be appropriate to that meeting, where we're just going through reports, mopping up, finalising any recommendations, finalising a report on the work that we've done, and then just looking forward to day 1 and how the new council is going to be looking?
Yeah, that'll be fine, Jane.
Yes, you're happy with that. Wonderful. Andre, you'll need to unmute yourself, Andre.
I'd muted and then it went back. Will there be, and I appreciate there's one more meeting coming up, but will there be a point of an overlap or some sort of continuity? There's an awful lot of good work that's gone around the table with all colleagues over the year, and I have to say that it would be rather important that there was some sort of continuity to this. Although I wouldn't want to see that the recommendations were then effectively pushed off the edge of a cliff. With all due respect. And I think there's we have looked at the matters in great detail, spent an awful lot of time understanding the complexities, but also the gravitas of what we've been discussing. So I would suggest that within recommendations that there was a point that we would obviously, want to ensure that we were able to regroup, to assess the recommendations, were they taken on board, were they not, and then actually question the administration of the day in, say, 3 months' time.
Yes, I think that's a very good suggestion. I think there's a huge amount of very, very good overview and scrutiny work that's going on in the county, in the districts and the borough, and to lose all that information, all that intelligence, all that work that has produced great changes, I think, in some of the policies of certainly the borough and the county. I think, and I've been saying this for some time, that this work has to be continued. This has to become foundation perhaps of future work, and it's the recommendations can be looked at by the new overview and scrutiny, by the new council, in terms of what has gone before and what has been suggested, because we don't do this for it to go nowhere. Absolutely. It has to have an effect. It has to have a legacy.
Jane, is something that has actually that you've actually brought to a head is what happens if the elections are postponed and obviously put for 3 or 4 months or whatever it may be. Does this scrutiny committee still carry on?
Oh, Andrew, I think that's perhaps one for you.
The answer is no. Sorry, just to be clear on this, so this is a shadow overview and scrutiny committee, which is looking at the transition arrangements into the unitary. That's why you've been concentrating on the budget. That's why you've been concentrating on the policies and the constitution. From the 1st of April, whether or not the elections are postponed or not, you will have a unitary authority which will be providing services and functions. And so therefore you need to have different arrangements in place. So this is different than the interim arrangements. This is actually saying that you would then be operating not as a shadow authority responsible for transition, but as a unitary authority responsible for services. So you would need to have different arrangements in place. Now, it could be that members of this committee are on that overview and scrutiny committee, but the nature of the work that you're looking at will change.
So there will be a scrutiny committee of some form in between?
Yes, sorry, I cut across you. Yes, there would be. So what we think would happen, and again, this is all proposition and we've heard all kinds of different dates. What we think would happen is that if the elections were cancelled for a significant period of time, then we would expect there to be regulations from MHCOG on what we would look like. And what is clear is that we as a unitary authority would then be wanting to make the point that it cannot just be an extension of the shadow arrangements because it is different. So in essence, we would be looking to help MHCOG to actually write those regulations so that they reflect the way in which we wish to be working as officers and members, as a unitary authority which is providing services from the 1st of April.
It really is very complicated.
Well, of course, elections are going to go ahead, so it's fine.
Yeah. You're an optimist, Andrew.
Oh, yes, it's the eternal question, isn't it? Somebody said to me, well, they managed to do it in America during a pandemic.
They did.
So we shall wait and see. So are we happy then that mopping up session on the 2nd of March and perhaps a brief report from Jane Carr on day 1. And as we've just had confirmed, we go to, we have a unitary authority as from the 1st of April. So whatever happens with the elections, the authority will change. Right. Thank you. Thank you very much indeed, everybody. Thank you for your contributions, and thank you, officers. Thank you, Andrew. Have enjoy the snow if it's